Welcome back, horror fans, cinephiles, and giallo enthusiasts. This is Tanner Leeser, your host for all things giallo, here on The King in Giallo. Our next stop on our journey through giallo cinema is the first film and first giallo from Luciano Ercoli, The Forbidden Photos of a Lady Above Suspicion, released in 1970. In this video, I will do a deep dive overview, then segue into a full review and GialliTally. The overview will be spoiler-free, the review and GialliTally will not. Here is The Forbidden Photos of a Lady Above Suspicion, overview. The Forbidden Photos of a Lady Above Suspicion is an Italian and Spanish co-production. The film is directed by Luciano Ercoli, written by the great Ernesto Gastaldi along with Manahen Velasco, and the music is by the great Ennio Morricone. You can bet the movie will be good. The cast consists of Dagmar Lassander as Minu, Pier Paolo Caponi as Peter, Simon Andreu as the blackmailer, I wonder what he does, and Nieves Navarro as Dominique. The plot of the film follows Minu, the wife of a financially struggling businessman, Peter, who is attacked on the beach by some stranger who claims that her husband had murdered a business partner so as to avoid a debt he was in. Minu tells her husband about the attack, but neglects to mention the more disturbing details involving what they'd told her. The stranger goes on to entangle Minu in a web of extortion as he coerces her into having sex with him, threatening otherwise to expose what he knows about Peter to the police, while simultaneously arranging photos to be taken of the adulterous act. The threats become worse and worse, causing Minu to open up to her husband, but when the police get involved, they can find no trace of this supposed blackmailer, raising the question, is Minu spiraling into insanity? Or is this all a conspiracy to drive her into madness? Ernesto Gastaldi revealed the nature behind the film's inception was that producers Luciano Ercoli and Alberto Pugliese worked for a production company as partners, and they were desperate to bring in funds as the company was on the rocks. In order to draw in some money, they needed to make a movie which would be cheap and commercially viable for the moment, which would so happen to be a giallo. They brought in Ernesto Gastaldi, already becoming a veteran of the new genre, to create a script for them, and luckily for the producers, Gastaldi already had a script he was sitting on. Despite Gastaldi hoping to direct the script himself for his wife to star in, he had to take the opportunity, and he sold them the script. The entire film was thrown together practically at the last minute and in a panic, and was hastily rushed through production, with one of the producers taking on the role of director. This was commonplace for productions of this time in Italy to be brought to life not from a place of artistry and a need to tell a story, but rather a financial necessity to keep a company afloat. To the credit of those involved in its production, this is not evident on screen. This Gastaldi script is another one of his odes to Les Diaboliques in terms of it being centered around a character who may be the target of an elaborate plot to drive them insane. The script is smart enough to sprinkle in some clues for the viewers paying close attention and still delight and surprise with the surprising yet logical double reveal. When one considers the technical aspects of the film, it's truly inspiring how incredible the execution of these disparate parts are and how they meld together into the final product. The photography on display is considerate and well conceived, the sets are indeed well crafted and inspired, and the music from Morricone is one of the greatest giallo soundtracks, being both captivating and contagious. The title gives nods to Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion, 1970 by Elio Petri, but the similarities between the two films is in names alone. Luciano Ercoli was born in 1929 and started as a producer of films in 1961. His producer credits include Whatever Happened to Baby Toto, 1964, the giallo comedy, A Pistol for Ringo, and The Return of Ringo, both 1965, and The Ruthless Four, 1968, the three of which being spaghetti westerns. This giallo would be his first film in the director's seat, and this occurrence is more than likely the result of an imperative to keep the costs down. Any hint of an amateur being in charge is nowhere to be seen, as Ercoli wisely had a circle of talented hands on deck. He would prove as time would go on that he was a competent director in his own right, and he would direct the giallo films Death Walks on High Heels, 1971, and Death Walks at Midnight, 1972. Ercoli would direct several more films in the 70s, sometimes under the name André Colbert, but would retire and walk away from film after inheriting a large fortune. Good for him. Giallo veterans are peppered within the cast, including the lead, Dagmar Lassander, who appeared in Hatchet for the Honeymoon, 1970, by Mario Bava, which came out earlier this same year. Nieves Navarro, billed as Susan Scott, Luciano Ercoli's wife, plays the best friend. She previously appeared with co-star Pier Paolo Caponi, who's playing Peter, in the 1969 giallo by Fernando de Leo, Naked Violence. Spanish actor Simón Andreu nails the role of the blackmailer, and he would go on to appear alongside Navarro in the two aforementioned Ercoli gialli, Death Walks on High Heels and Death Walks at Midnight. Fun fact, this Ennio Morricone song from The Forbidden Photos of a Lady Above Suspicion appears in the motion picture movie Baby Driver.
George, come on down. May I?
What do you think about that, baby?
The film is available on home video from Blue Underground and Arrow Video. I have owned the DVD from Blue Underground for the better part of a decade. But I digress. On to the review. Spoilers ahead for those of you who haven't yet seen the film. You've been warned. My prediction for the movie's GialliTally score. Now, I've seen the movie several times. I don't recall too much of an abundance of cliches, so I will guess around the 400 to 450 mark. Well, let's begin the GialliTally and review portion of the video, beginning as always with the previewing cliches. The repeat offenders are 1 point for actor, 3 for writer, 3 for composer, and 5 for director. Nieves Navarro was in Naked Violence, 1 point. Also, Pier Paolo Caponi was in Naked Violence, 1 point. Dagmar Lassander was in Hatchet for the Honeymoon, 1 point. By the way, I realize that the order of the giallo films I have been covering from the book have been in alphabetical order for each year, so that explains why sometimes I cover a film which technically came out after another film I cover soon after. This is one of those cases. For all intents and purposes, Hatchet for the Honeymoon, the next movie on The King in Giallo, technically came out before The Forbidden Photos of a Lady Above Suspicion. Ernesto Gastaldi wrote Libido, The Murder Clinic, The Sweet Body of Deborah, and So Sweet, So Perverse, 12 points total. I'll mention it here just so I can get it out of the way. He also technically wrote the story for A Come Assassino, A for Assassin, but he didn't write that script. Ennio Morricone composed for The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, Vergogna Schifosi, and A Quiet Place in the Country, 9 points total. Also, I will point out when I tallied the repeat offenders for The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, I neglected to mention that Ennio Morricone composed for Vergogna Schifosi. So moving forward, The Bird with the Crystal Plumage will have an extra 3 points in its final GialliTally score. Cliché points for the title. The Forbidden Photos of a Lady Above Suspicion. I don't quite have one, but for The Girl Who Knew Too Much, we added Hitchcockian titles to the cliches, so let's apply that once more. 5 points. First Look. We have 25 points for the Italian director, and an additional 15 points for the movie releasing during the golden age of giallo cinema. I don't consider this movie quintessential unless you're a big Luciano Ercoli fan. And would you look at that? It is plot o'clock. 'Tis rather nippy. We have A Cold Open, 5 points. Art featured, 5 points. This dame smoking in the bathtub is Mignou. We hear her give a brief voiceover.
I'm going to give up cigarettes today, and I'm going to stop drinking. And I'm not going to take any more of those tranquilizers. Anyway, they say it's bad for you to take them if you drink.
Besides, I read somewhere that those pills can provoke hallucinations.
Does anybody believe her? I don't either. I will give that bit, exposition dumping, 2 points because that was rather sloppy of the script. Fresh out from the shower, Mignou marvels at a framed picture of her husband, Peter. What a lucky gal. The next voiceover says,
I know what I'm going to do tonight. I'm going to eat out, and I'll phone you and say that I've been invited out by a friend.
and I cannot tell if they have a healthy relationship or not. In any case, it seems that she is bored. F is for fashion. I like the outfit. 5 points. Third voiceover.
When you return tomorrow night, I won't let you make love to me right away. I'll say that I've fallen in love with another man and that we have to get a divorce, but we can still be friends. Then, after you make a terrible scene,
Yep, she is definitely bored. It's been hardly 3 minutes and Minu is already defaulting on her New Year's resolutions of giving up the pills and alcohol mixture. Character takes prescription pills or sedatives, extra if with alcohol, 10 points.
that's absolutely my very last, I swear it.
Sure, hun. I won't say L is for lies because despite us all knowing she wouldn't last long, I wouldn't say that she was lying per se, nor her fantasies about what she will say to Peter. It's all fantasy play right now. We cut to Minu walking alone along the beach while being spied upon by this man on a motorcycle. The man rides around Minu in a rather threatening way. She escapes down a stairway only to find herself cornered by the biker. Z is for Zoom, 5 points. She asks what he wants and he says, you. We get a little cat and mouse action. The man unveils a blade from his cane. K is for knife. Extra for the blade reflecting the light. 10 points. Boing. She confronts the stranger, but he says,
No, I'm not going to use force with you. I want you to beg me. I want you to plead for my kisses. Plead!
I'll say this now. He has some of the worst dialogue and perhaps the worst delivery of said lines, so strap in for that. Typical 1970s Italian misogyny. Woman is molested, groped, or sexually assaulted. 7 points. The man begins questioning Minu about her husband. Q is for questions. 5 points. He tells Minu that her husband, Peter, is a murderer. After another moment of intimidation, the man leaves, telling Minu she may go. T is for telephone. 5 points. Minu tells Peter over the phone that she will wait for him in the bar. While she waits, she has a brandy and another one, which doesn't seem like a genuine pour from the barkeep. She walks over to 2 men playing cards and one of them orders,
Sit down.
which she does. This brief scene with these men is odd, I'll say. I think that they might be going home with this woman if they play their cards right. Hey-o! But seriously, they don't give me protector vibes. After some brews, her heroic Peter shows up to a rather suggestive shot. Let's do it, people. Everyone together now. Symbolism. Remember what I was just saying about these guys? Look how bummed they are that she's leaving. Minu tells Peter about her encounter earlier, to which Peter says,
Yes, but he actually didn't do anything. He just held you down, and he threatened you. It was probably some kind of a prank.
yeah. Typical 1970s Italian misogyny. Woman is gaslit. 4 points. And in this movie, there is plenty more where that came from. Minu struggles to tell her husband about what the man had said to her about Peter. Peter says she should have called the police. She still should. But Minu objects to this. He says, so be it, then says he must go downstairs to make a business call to Munich. Later on in the evening, Peter confronts Minu about the pills, prompting her to lie and to say that they are an old bottle. Okay, L is for lies. 5 points. Minu then asks Peter if, hypothetically, if the man had done more to her, would Peter still love her? Peter assuages her fears and says of course he would, unless she were to have a lover. He attempts to make light of her situation, which goes over as well as performing comedy in Berkeley. Cut to Minu wearing a ridiculous wig out at a club. This man, George, tells her that Peter phoned in and will be there later in the night, to the dismay of Minu. George is a business partner of Peter. Gratuitous 1970s dancing. 2 points. Minu's friend, Dominique, enters the club with a gentleman caller, let's say. The four become acquainted, then Dominique dances with George. Here's another example of the superb writing.
Poor dear. Now don't do anything stupid like Jean Dubois.
Dubois? Jean Dubois? What did he do?
He killed himself.
This may be the result of the English redubbing. I don't always want to cast aspersions against Gastaldi or the script, but wow, some moments are bad. Anyways, this news jogs Minu's memory of her attack and the other night. We get a flashback. Dominique snaps Minu out of her flashback. They mention that Dubois had many enemies, but they should change the subject. The next day, Minu is reading about the death of Dubois, which is associated to an embolism caused by the bends, or decompression sickness. Now, I know what the Benz is, and maybe you do too, or not, but the movie really treats the audience as if this is something which must be over-explained. I'll let the movie explain it though as it comes up in the script. As Minou bathes, she hilariously recounts the newspaper information about the circumstances of Dubois' death. Animals featured: pet, tortoise, 2 points. She once again repeats in her mind the newspaper quote. The Benz must have been a very new phenomenon or something, I don't know. Peter notices Minou was reading up on the death of Dubois and remarks that he is quite lucky because he had owed Dubois money, but Minou asks that Peter must still have to pay the money to Dubois' estate, to which he agrees. Minou asks Peter if anything is worrying him. He says no, then remarks that he will have to stay late to work at the office tonight. He says he will make it up to her in due time. Minou says she will hang out with Dominique, her attempt to make Peter jealous. Then they begin a brief discussion about her, whether she likes women or not, and how Peter must know something about it because the two of them used to hook up. He jokingly tells her to leave Dominique's at 5 p.m. and to meet him at his office so that they may speak to the police commissioner. Minou then escalates a quickie with Peter before he leaves. N is for nudity, 5 points. We see Dominique making a brief business-related phone call. The two women are now hanging out. Rooftop scene, 5 points. Minou is clearly anxious about things.
Aren't you being a bit stupid about it?
Typical 1970s Italian misogyny, woman is called stupid, 3 points. Sure.
I'd have adored being violated.
Jesus! Dominique tells Minou to forget all about the man who accosted her, especially since she hasn't seen him again. Minou agrees, and the two women head back to Dominique's so that she may show Minou something. Nude photos, of course. I'm only counting these images as one instance of nudity for later, just so we're clear. Dominique says she'd be thrilled if the photographer had spread the photos of her to the world. She's quite the exhibitionist, it seems. She offers Minou to make herself a drink, then asks to show her some photos of a more, graphic nature. Minou asks about Dominique and Peter before Minou and him became involved, but retracts the question when Dominique asks her if she wants to know details. The two flip through the photos. Something catches Minou's eye. E is for eyeballs, 5 points, and extra points for Z is for zoom a zoom on eyes. Add another 5 points. This particular photo shows the man credited as blackmailer with a woman. Noticing that Minou has taken an interest in that photo, she offers for her to keep it, saying that she acquired it like all the others upon a trip she had to Copenhagen. Cut to the police commissioner, who has the strangest bit of facial hair, which only adheres to the bottom portion of his upper lip. He tells them that Minou played the scenario correctly, and that these types usually never come back again, but if he does, for her to call him at once. The commissioner excuses himself, and I'd like to point out in the background we can see scuba tanks, which, if you know anything about the Benz, you know it usually occurs to scuba divers who are at great depths. Upon Peter's return, Minou asks him if he is nervous and to share with her what is troubling him. He mentions the business problems that are happening, mostly with financiers. Minou adds, like Dubois. Peter becomes suspicious as to why Minou keeps bringing Dubois up. He begins to show his wife their plans for a new counter-pressure gauge, which he hopes will revolutionize diving. In walks George. Business matters are addressed. George escorts Minou out of the building, and when Peter sits down to presumably make a business call, he asks to be connected with Dominique. What? On the way out, George adds that Dubois was a loan shark type and his death was rather a blessing. Minou then is introduced to the new decompression chamber. She watches as a man sits in the chamber at 15 atmospheres of pressure, eliciting another flashback to the blackmailer. George then explains the procedure of slowly decompressing divers to intervals of less and less atmospheres of pressure in order to return them to the surface levels safely, or else without this, they will die in minutes from the bends. Later that night, Minou and Peter are in bed. She reminds him that no matter what he has going on or what he has done, that she will always be with him. She's about to tell him what the blackmailer said to her, but a phone call interrupts them. Minou goes to answer the phone. Again, why would he send his wife to do that? She answers and finds the blackmailer at the other end of the line. He taunts her about what she must have learned about her husband and the dead man in the time since, but when she threatens the man with calling the police, he advises against that or else he will play them this recording.
I guess we can take him out of the decompression chamber now. Look, his face is turning blue. Are you sure no one will suspect anything?
Don't worry, it looked like a normal drowning. They'll think it was suicide. cares?
Audio recording device, 5 points. Extra points for T is for telephone for the blackmailer making a phone call. Add another 5 points. The blackmailer threatens Minu to keep a new appointment with him for tomorrow, or else he will send that recording to the police. As Peter walks in, Minu pretends she is speaking with Dominique. The next day, Minu goes to meet the blackmailer. Urban locales, 2 points. Not a spiral staircase, okay? Once outside the door, she hesitates, then recalls what he had said about sending the recording to the police. Then she takes a pill and rings the door. The door opens and she goes in. The door then slams shut behind her. Minu seems to pass into the Black Lodge. Maybe it's been Dale Cooper this whole time. She looks around the place when suddenly the lights come on and she is ambushed by the blackmailer. She asks him how much. The man pulls out the recording device, saying Dubois recorded all of his business meetings and happened to record his own murder. Minu demands to have it. He rejects the $1,000 and says that it just came into his possession. He demands her to sit down. She gives him cash, but he just throws it in the air and proceeds to taunt her.
Let go of me! Open that door!
Y is for yelling, extra for it being a hysterical woman, 10 points. Minu is presented with an ultimatum. Either submit herself to the blackmailer and his sexual desires, or risk Peter going to jail over the evidence which the man has against him. She yields to him and says for him to go on and get it over with, but he says no. She must beg him and be his slave. She attempts to slap him, but he catches her hand and tosses her to the bed. He commands her to undress, to get on her knees, and to keep undressing. Cut to Peter and George. George asks Peter what the matter is. He doesn't say much. They discuss business, saying the lawyers of the estate are worse than Dubois was. Peter takes a call, then goes out. Cut back to Minu. The man unties her bonds from the bedpost. He gives her the tape, then congratulates her on her performance. Necking, 5 points. Later on, Minu takes the tape and tosses it in the ocean. Evidence is seen being destroyed or hidden, 5 points. Even later on, Minu is home with Peter, who asks her what she did today. She says she was out with Dominique. A is for alibi, 5 points. A record begins playing, revealing Dominique has been over. Busted! Dominique says to Peter that she wins and knew Minu would make up some story. Then she covers for Minu, saying that the two of them have been planning a surprise for Peter. Dominique closes out by saying that we all need some secrets to stay happy. Hell, I'll add it now. S is for secrets, 5 points. Once again, business pulls Peter away. Alone now, the two women speak briefly. Dominique notices Minu's distress, but the two women agree to talk about it tomorrow. Minu freshens up, takes another pill. Jeez, I need a pill counter for her. The next scene is this bizarre supper scene where Minu, Peter, and Dominique take quaint little slurps of soup without any audible audio of the scene.
You must suffer and be my slave. Get undressed.
In her mind, Minu plays back the threats made by the blackmailer as Dominique and Peter seem to flirt. There's a brief moment where we can hear what the two are talking about just before it is swallowed by the swelling music. Dominique and Peter ought to just get a room because it seems like they are setting up for a romantic evening between the two of them. Minu just watches. Suddenly, her memory takes her back to the moment spent in bed with the blackmailer. Note that we didn't see this previously, so I can't justify these as true flashbacks according to how I count them. But let's add I is for infidelity, extra points for blackmail occurring afterwards, 10 points. Yeah, spoiler. And aardvarking, 10 points. I must say this nightmare music by Morricone is on point. During the sexual encounter, the man slaps Minu. Typical 1970s Italian misogyny, woman is slapped, 5 points. He then ties her wrists to the bedposts. Bondage scene, 7 points. Cut to Minu waking from her nightmare. She runs, clothed in her sleepwear, into the shower. Peter asks what the matter is, but Minu breaks into hysterics, begging him not to leave her. The next day, Peter takes off, and the blackmailer is revealed to be around the corner, waiting for him to leave. G is for gloves, 5 points. I'll point out, these gloves are dark brown, not black, which is observed more easily in a few moments. He hands his next batch of blackmail to the houseboy, I think might be his title. Minu is in bed looking over what he has sent her, forbidden photos of her. a lady above suspicion. The two photos show the two of them in bed together. She confronts him and commands him to leave the house. He reminds Minou that she will obey him or else Peter will receive the photographs. She threatens that Peter will kill him once he finds out what he's done, but the blackmailer retorts that husbands don't like their wives to think of them as murderers, nor for them to jump into bed with other men. He then reveals that Peter never murdered Dubois and that he himself had made up the whole story. He taunts her some more, stating that she must be relieved to know that Peter really is no murderer, and when she asks him what his reason for all this is, he says that she is the reason. We cut to Dominique in bed with some man whose identity is hidden due to the framing. 3 guesses who it might be. Well, it's not Peter, as I was mistaken. It is George. The phone rings, Dominique speaks with Minou and promptly kicks George out of her house, warning that Minou must not see him there, but also saying that she will see him later tonight. I want to mention, in the viewing I did for this, I made the mistake of thinking this was Peter. I make dumb observations like that quite a bit, and I blame my eyesight for it. Dominique answers the door and Minou falls in. There's this great jump cut where now we are in the bathroom. Dominique quips that the blackmailer deserves something for his ingenuity, not among the better things to say to a victim of sexual exploitation. They talk about the situation a bit. Dominique continues to say all the wrong things, adding that Minou may have subconsciously wanted a new lover, plus that she must have enjoyed it. Minou denies this, and I'm not going to weigh in on what I think about that, thank you. They agree that what may be best would be to buy off the blackmailer for good, but Minou warns that she'd offered him $1,000 cash and he'd thrown it in her face. She assumes that if she sold her jewels that she could offer him $10,000, and Dominique adds that she can double that, and that she doubts that he would be so callous to deny that much money. Sure. Dominique writes Minou a check, and when Minou says she couldn't possibly pay it back because of Peter's suffering business, Dominique says it is a Christmas present. Damn, nobody's writing me a Christmas check for $20,000. I got the Showa Godzilla films on Criterion. That's as good as gold, I assume. We close out the scene with one more pill for the road. There's a brief clip of Minou walking into a jewelry store. Then we cut to the blackmailer with his stupid cane knife. Okay, it's kinda cool, but it's a little too Gangs of New York for me. The buzzer rings, and he opens the door. In walks Minou. We get this great mirror shot where he surprises her. She offers him $20,000 cash for the photo negatives and to be left alone henceforth. $20,000? So I guess Dominique didn't double the amount like she said she would. She matched the amount. Whatever. He says the pictures may not be for sale. Then he takes the lump of cash and sets it down. He taunts her even more, saying why should he sell her back her freedom for that much? Minou threatens to kill him, then herself. Then he reminds her of how their bodies felt locked together. He says it was so good for her that she's come back to pay him. He tells her to take the money back, then gives her 3 days to come back to him, and if she doesn't, then he will send the photos to Peter. She slaps him. We get this scene where Minou rides up an elevator, then contemplates throwing herself off the top. Back at Dominique's, they talk about the escalation of the current predicament and decide that Minou must tell Peter. Dominique hands her the phone. Cut to Peter pacing about the house, visibly upset. Dominique speaks to Minou's defense regarding the decisions she's made in the hopes of protecting Peter, but Peter is insulted that Minou could have believed that he ever would have murdered someone over a loan, then prostituted herself, in his words. Peter assumes command of the situation and calls up the commissioner. Minou, Peter, and Commissioner Frank are outside the room where Minou had met with the blackmailer.
We're not supposed to.
And yet we are. They go in but find the place to be seemingly abandoned. No sign whatsoever of any recent habitation, including none of the bizarre art which had previously adorned the walls and posts. She is questioned as whether for certain this is the true apartment. She asserts yes, it is. Minou tries to convince Peter. He doubts her, she tries again, and he says of course he believes her, which he obviously doesn't. I will add extra points for art because now it is more central to the plot. Add another 5 points. Back at home, Minou takes more pills, and her and Peter go over again whether she is sure about the apartment and the building. She asks if Peter still loves her, and he says yes. Later that night, a storm is raging on. Someone enters the grounds through the gate. Close up on a door handle as someone is creeping in. 5 points. Y'all, I want to say these are black gloves, but I know they're not. Minu turns the light on, but the lights go out. She wakes Peter and tells him, but he turns his light on, no problem. She insists that there's an intruder, and Peter agrees to look. They find a door open with water trailing inside the house. Peter investigates, then finds the tortoise, and I swear that fucker only exists for this moment in the film. Minu laughs off her fear, and Peter asks if he deserves a drink. She agrees and goes to get it, but spies the blackmailer standing outside the house looking in. She screams for Peter, but he doesn't find the man outside. This scene is unintentionally hilarious. Just watch.
He's there!
A man.
No, he disappeared.
Disappeared.
I saw a man. The one.
What man?
But he disappeared. It's true.
Stop it, will you?
The commissioner parks outside the house. Minu is in bed being checked on by a doctor. The commissioner and Peter speak briefly about Minu. He tells Peter that the apartment has been unrented for a year. The doctor tells Peter that his wife needs more rest and must cut the tranquilizer pills she's been taking. The doctor adds that the two of them must take a trip together because her fantasy is a result of her husband's inattentiveness. Minu and Dominique agree to meet up in the near future. The doctor departs while Minu answers a call from the blackmailer who, once again, taunts her regarding her now involving the police. 3 days, he says. Minu calls for Peter. The men enter the room. Minu says it's the blackmailer, but they don't hear anybody on the line. And when they hand the phone back to Minu, it is revealed that the man is playing a recording of an automated message. Minu is being questioned about this fictionary man, and when asked for a description, she goes to show the photograph, but it is not in her purse. Minu begins to have a full hysterical breakdown, and all the men just look at each other and shake their heads. I'm sorry, but this shit is so funny how the film is framing it all. She begs for them to call Dominique. Cut to Dominique speaking with them now. Minu tells her to tell the others about the photograph she took, but Dominique denies any such event having happened. Minu has a series of flashbacks. The commissioner asks for a word with Peter in private. The scene ends as Minu stares daggers through Dominique, who refuses to meet her gaze. Later, the mail is delivered, and Minu searches for the blackmail photos, but nothing turns up. Peter says it is because she dreamed it all up. The phone rings, and again, business calls Peter away. He must meet with some potential investors. As Peter heads out, Dominique steps out from the shadows in disguise. U is for undercover, 5 points. Peter continues to drive. Minu sits in bed reading, and someone enters the home. Minu, true to her nature, takes another pill. First person POV, 5 points. The intruder moves deeper into the house. Peter arrives to meet the investors from Germany, but forgot his plans to show them. He heads back to the house to retrieve them. George goes in and meets with the Germans as Peter heads back. Minu looks about the room when suddenly the lights go out and the phone line is dead. The scenes will occasionally cut back to Peter en route to the house. Minu gets out of bed, approaches the door, and grabs a statuette as a weapon. She opens the door and proceeds into the darkness of the home. She enters the study, sets down the statuette, and lights a candle. She suddenly notices the cane knife and the man's coat adorning a statue in the corner of the room. As she stares down the sight, a gloved hand appears from below and grabs Minu's ankle. She falls to the ground and beats repeatedly at the hand. She is freed and runs away. The lights burst on, and Minu looks every which way, anticipating the man's appearance. She notices a shoe protruding out from behind a red curtain. Minu draws a blade and attacks at the spot, but only finds that fucking tortoise. The blackmailer reveals himself, wielding the phone. Peter parks in the driveway now and walks up to the door. The man is atop Minu, attacking her with the blade. Peter walks back to his car. The attack continues. Peter finally walks in and observes the man atop his wife. He draws a pistol and shoots him in the back. Bang! The man topples over. Peter, without checking his wife, goes to the phone and begins dialing. Minu awakens and pleads to Peter that she wasn't lying all along, but he orders her to stay where she is. Peter then admits that the man was all his invention, all this time for the purpose of driving her insane in the hopes that she would take her own life. His plan was fumbled when the man Peter was paying took to playing the maniac and wasn't following instructions. Quickly add O is for obsession. I'll grant extra points for the blackmailer being obsessed. 10 points. Mistaken identity for someone else being believed to be the killer, or the mastermind in this case, 5 points. Hidden identity of the killer until the final moments, again, mastermind, 5 points. And betrayal by the killer or the accomplice is killed, 5 points. Proceed. Peter picks up the cane knife using a hanky so as to not incriminate himself with fingerprints. He says this will all go down as another crazed sex killing, and the police will thank him for his heroism. Suddenly, a voice shouts for Peter to stop. It is the commissioner. Typical 1970s Italian misogyny. A woman is saved by a man. 10 points. Peter attempts to explain the situation, but the commissioner is having none of it. Guns drawn. He is warned a final time to drop the knife, but he keeps walking forward, and the commissioner opens on him. Bang! The killer is killed by someone. 10 points. And the killer dies accidentally by gunshot. 5 points. Again, I'm slightly amending these cliches from quote-unquote killer to include Peter and the blackmailer. Dominique rushes in. She had called the commissioner. They secure the crime scene and call an ambulance, plus crime scene forensics teams. Dominique agrees to file a report, likewise agrees to remain by Minut's side. Dominique takes one look at the blackmailer and recognizes him. This much she confirms to the commissioner, who asks her if she knows him. Dominique and the commissioner take a seat while she tells him her side of the story. She reveals that she didn't think much of the blackmailer claims, but George had told Dominique that Peter had taken out a large life insurance claim on his wife, and she knew that for a large sum of money, that Peter would even kill his own mother. She says the photo was the one clue that solidified things. Peter had made that mistake by giving it to Dominique, and that she and him had met the man one time during one of their many excursions to Copenhagen. No one knew about that photo except for Minut, Peter, and Dominique, and she knew that Peter would have wanted it destroyed, so she took it and hid it, fearing that it alone wouldn't be enough to convince everybody of Minut's claims. Dominique held onto it and waited for the perfect opportunity to reveal everything to the commissioner, being tonight. She flirts with him, then asks to have one of his detectives drive her home. As they leave, some photographers snap some quick photos of them. I'm a bit conflicted about this, but they don't seem to be crime scene photographers, especially because of the reaction the commissioner is having towards them, so I will add R is for reporter, 5 points. While we're stopped, add odd clue, 5 points. Cut to the two women leaving the hospital. The doctor tells Minut to quit the tranks for God's sake, to which she says she will, plus the whiskey. Sure she will. George tells her not to worry about money, since Peter's life insurance will pay out. The two women drive off, with Dominique joking that they should go back to her place because she has more wonderful photos from Copenhagen. Stop. As they drive off, I will add one last cliche. Foreign locales, Barcelona, 5 points. The film ends, and thank God for that. And that's the forbidden photos of A Lady Above Suspicion. So I must be honest, this is one of my least favorite giallo films I've seen, and my least favorite I have covered so far. I have owned this film for over 10 years, and while I don't dislike the movie, I certainly enjoy it a very minimal amount. There aren't many giallo films that I do not like. This one I don't enjoy all that much, but it has enough elements in it which make it worth it for me to own it and to keep it in my collection. The script is fine, the acting is likewise fine, perhaps it is the English-speaking dub which is trash. Some parts of the film are unintentionally funny. I'll say I was surprised when I first got to the climax, and hell, I was engaged with what was happening. But if you know me enough by now, you'll know I don't dig giallo movies all that much that are less about murders and more about gaslighting. You might like this movie, and that's a-okay. There is plenty to enjoy. The score is really good. Some of the imagery, particularly the set designs, are truly inspiring. Let me add up an AZ bonus point I skipped over during the review. Add extra points for S's for secrets for the mastermind, Peter, having an impossible to predict motive, another 5 points. I'll say, Peter is not out of the realm of predictable suspects, but him setting up the life insurance claim is nowhere set up in the plot. Let's segue to the GialliTally cliches for this movie. Post-giallo viewing cliches. The reason for the killings. Greed and gain, 5 points. The reason for the investigation. We don't quite have one, but I'll go ahead and say the police investigation for the final few minutes, 2 points. Bonus points. The style bonus. The movie is fairly stylish. There's a POV, a few zooms, some usage of colored lights, but I'd say most of the style is in the set design. Ercoli is a capable director for his film debut, and he proves that he can be trusted behind the camera. Out of a maximum possible of 25 points, I will give 14 points for The Forbidden Photos of a Lady Above Suspicion. Soundtrack. Oh, indeed, 15 points. Bad effects, no bad effects, no points. Final look, extra points. The Deadpool tallying how many kills and deaths are featured in the film. I break it down as thus. 10 points per kill or death scene for the main Deadpool, plus any stylistic kill multipliers, which we didn't add yet, and we won't for this movie, plus the knife kill bonus, which again we will not add. We have the Blackmailer, gunshot, 10 points, and Peter, gunshot, 10 points. No stylistic points for gunshots. Extended Deadpool for those other deaths mentioned but not seen, I'll give 3 points for each. Dubois, 3 points. Red herrings for the total number of legitimate suspects in the film. 5 points per legit suspect are awarded. I don't count that many, honestly, but I will give the Blackmailer, Peter, Dominique, and Mignou, and I'm only adding her on the chance that she somehow was making it all up, not even knowing it. That is 20 points total. Flashback sequences, 5 points each. Now this movie had a lot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14, for a total of 70 points for flashbacks. Nudity. I award 5 points for ass, 7 for breasts, and 10 for genitalia. Mignou, breasts, 7 points. Dominique, breasts. Technically, you see them several times in this photo reel, but I'm only counting one instance, 7 points. The nudity, besides the photography scene, is somewhat lax in this movie. It's a lot of side boob. Ladies and gentlemen, for The Forbidden Photos of a Lady Above Suspicion, I awarded the film an AZ score of 16 out of 26. With the bonus points for these, we have a modified score total of 115 points. And for the full GialliTally score, I award The Forbidden Photos of a Lady Above Suspicion a GialliTally score of 491 points. Compared to Perversion Story in first with 571 points, The Forbidden Photos of a Lady Above Suspicion is in fifth, behind The Bird with the Crystal Plumage in second with 564 points now. Remember, I added that 3 from earlier. $5 for an August Moon in third with 547 points, and Double Face in fourth with 539 points. I predicted that the movie would end up getting around 400 to 450 points, so, I mean, I was a tad behind, but honestly, I don't recall too much about this movie. I feel like it's one where I have to constantly jog my memory to remind me what happens in it. Most of the points came in from the flashback sequences, but like I've stated before, these points don't mean a movie is better or worse. Please like this video, share it with your friends if they are horror fans or cinephiles, subscribe to The King in Giallo if you haven't yet, and if you have any questions, thoughts, curiosities, or concerns, leave those below in the comment section and I will get back to you. Give The King in Giallo a follow on Instagram and a like on Facebook. Next time on The King in Giallo will be the overview, review, and GialliTally for the 4th Giallo film from Mario Bava, Hatchet for the Honeymoon. Thank you very much for your continued support. This is Tanner Leeser for The King in Giallo, and if nothing else, I'll see you next time.
You have to beg me, to plead for love. You have to long for me with passion. You must suffer and be my slave. You enjoyed it so much, you've come back for more. It was such a great pleasure that now you've come back to pay me.
She has to act like a prostitute to destroy the proof. Don't be bitchy, dear.
I know I'd still love you.
Even if I was raped by an Amazon?
Peter, I wish you wouldn't joke about this. Now I know how much your love means to me.
Better late than never.